Nope. Okay. Good evening, everyone. So great. It's so good to see you. Glad you came out. It's great to see so many people come out for this topic. And I know there's even more viewing online by TV, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. So our goal this evening is continue to progress in our development of a master plan for the Patterson Farm, a beautiful resource publicly owned in our community that is underutilized. And we are at a threshold kind of point with this second public forum, in that the architects, engineers, consulting firm have delivered to the committee much of the information that the township and the committee need to make informed, intelligent decisions about the property. And so we're going to go through a lot of that information tonight. And my name is Dennis Stedman. I'm the chair of the Ad Hoc Property Committee. We have other committee members here. If those that are here want to stand up and be recognized, Jim Scott in the back, John Mohan, Fred Childs is here, and Bet is in the front along with Ron Schmidt. Did I miss any? We have most of the committee here. They've spent a lot of time, a lot of hours as volunteers to try to improve this property and get better utilization of this property. So welcome to our second public forum as we build this project along. All right, I'm going to advance the slides. I said we're building a master plan, and with the information that Doug is presenting tonight, which is just kind of skimming the top of the information that's been generated, you really don't want him to present it all. It's way too much for one evening, but he's going to hit the highlights. But what we've done is we're creating the building blocks of what we need to build a well-informed master plan. And remember what a plan is. A plan isn't an idea. An idea is a lofty thing up in the sky. A plan tethers that idea to the ground and is a path to execute it, to actually do it. You know, well, why don't we do this or why don't we do that? Those are ideas. We're trying to build a plan, which means it's executable. There's dollar signs associated with it. There's timelines associated with expertise, resources, codependencies between them. So we're trying to build a plan, and it's not easy. It's taken a long time. I'm not going to apologize for that. I wish it could be done sooner, but it is where it is. The building blocks that we'll cover this evening real quickly is just an overview of the vision. You've seen this before, the vision that the committee has for this property, and that's been developed with a lot of your input. The second topic is agriculture and farming. That's always been a given that is an important piece of agricultural property, 300 years of continuous farming, originally Quaker farming. So that's a big part of any plan that is developed. Then we're going to go into the buildings, the condition assessments, the workable floor plans. What are feasible, doable floor plans for those buildings under certain various reuses, estimated repair and improvement costs, and then alternative future uses together with an estimated value. If you use this building for X, someone will pay Y dollars per month for it, or someone will pay nothing per month for it, that type of thing. So and potential alternative site plans and layout. The site is today as it was when the Pattersons, but largely as it was when the Pattersons sold it. It was two private farmsteads, all made sense if that's all you're doing. But if it's going to have a different use, a different set of uses, public uses, which is what we're trying to get to, then the site isn't exactly laid out perfectly, right? We all know that. So potential alternative site plans. These are the parts that Doug Seller of Seller Drury Architecture is going to be presenting. And then we want your input and your support to these ideas. And he's put much of this on the wall over here. And like I say, he's skimming the top of all the information that is available. What it is not tonight, it's not a detailed historical assessment of the buildings, of the property. It's not any final use recommendations. We have potential use recommendations. The committee has to go through those and determine what it believes are the best. These are potential recommendations, tangible, functional, feasible recommendations that the consultants have come up. It's not the final priorities, as you'll see in some of Doug's information. This is the consultant saying, if you did all of this at once, here's what it would be. We're not going to do everything at once. It's going to have to be prioritized and staged. And so the cost estimates aren't final. Each individual detailed estimate is final, but what we decide to do early versus later in a multi-stage, multi-year plan is what has to be determined yet. So I hope that's helpful. So the vision for Patterson Farm, and we've gone through this before, but I think it's worth repeating. It's 234 acres of land that stands out from the surrounding highways and suburbs because of its unique and beautiful features. Our photographer friend here can to write a book about its unique and beautiful features. It's like an oasis with farm fields, trees, ponds, and wildlife. The farm is also home to two historical Pennsylvania Quaker farmsteads, which are important to our past and to our community today. People use and appreciate this special place for growing food, creating art, finding inspiration, and providing education. The land is incredibly fertile soil that has been farmed continuously for over 300 years. Now, that's the aspiration. That's not today. It's farm field today, and it's beautiful today, but it's not going to stay that way. And we really don't have the community utilization of the property as this vision envisions. Agriculture and farming. I think it's important to point out that farming at Patterson Farm produces more food and farm products today than it ever has in its 340 years of agriculture. It's an extremely productive piece of land that's extremely well managed and farmed. Currently, it produces over 14 different food products, ranging from cantaloupe, zucchini, tomatoes, sweet corn, field corn, and soybeans for livestock. I'm not here to give a commercial for Charland Farms. That's not our role, and it's certainly not the township's role. But Charland Farms does lease this land, and the vegetables and produce that are grown there is what they sell at their farm stand, and they also sell it to other local stands. It's incredibly productive. Recent annual production figures are these: 60,000 dozens ears of corn. It's kind of hard to say. 50,000 pounds of tomatoes, 4 different varieties of tomatoes are coming off that land every year. 25,000 pounds of watermelon, 25,000 pounds of cantaloupe, 20,000 bushels of field corn, and a whole lot more. And it's a testament, really, to how impressive an agricultural production that is. And it's occurred without using those farm buildings. It's not about a barn that's 150 years old that a farmer needs. Farmers don't need those kind of barns anymore. There's no horses or cattle. The old farm buildings are important and valuable, but not for farming. They provide us scenic views. Everyone loves to see the Pennsylvania Bank barns on the horizon. It's important to our history and our heritage in this community. It's an agricultural community originally, a Quaker community. And farm buildings have not been needed or useful for farming at the Patterson Farm. They haven't been, because the farmers haven't had access to them. And look at those production figures. That bountiful production is because Charlene Farms knows what they're doing. God bless him. Tim Stewart, good Pennsylvania agriculture grad, Penn State agriculture grad, has won a yield contest, not only statewide, nationwide. They use modern and responsible practices and tremendous financial equipment and facilities and the agricultural inputs that go into that. Farming at this scale is not like going into your garden and you poking a couple tomato plants and you cut some lettuce in the morning. Last year, fertilizer went up to from $7,000 for a tractor trailer, big giant semi, to $24,000 a truck. They had to buy 15 of those. Look at your household budget, take 24,000 times 15. That's one input. Then there's the seeds and the plants and the irrigation tubing and the plastic layers and the insecticides. I mean, it goes on and on. The $750,000 combine, one machine, $500,000 tractor. So it's a business. It's expensive. It needs dedication. Banks, no farmer can operate without a bank. You go to them in the spring, you're borrowing millions of dollars in hope that you harvest, you're paying them back. That's how it works. So farming is in pretty good shape there. It really is. It's been very productive, thanks to that family. The challenge at Patterson Farm that's triggered this community project really is not farming. And this clicker is slow. Maybe I got to point it elsewhere. If the community wants to save the historical buildings and have access to the property and to the buildings, to the overall site, they just have to be put to productive use. They're sitting idle. They've been idle for 25 years. They're in disrepair. Doug can give us the chapter and verse on exactly their condition. And they're boarded up for a reason. The public is not invited there except for the AOI little island around the Janney house, because that house has been used and therefore is in good condition. When they're not used, they deteriorate, they get boarded up, they're dangerous. You can't let people in there. So any new uses that we've looked at and we charged with the architects and the engineers, have to meet at least 3 goals. They have to be compatible with our first priority, and that is farming. We can't plan for that, for those farmsteads, and interfere with the farming. That's a given. We want to support the farmer. We don't want to be in their way. If that means some split rail fences and some borders and some, don't enter here, enter there, so be it. We want to support that farmer. So it's got to be compatible with that. Maybe I got to point it that way. It's got to be compatible with the historic nature of the site. That's very much a part of what makes it special. And it has to create value. The use has to bring to the community some utility, some value. And it's either going to be a hard value, like dollar revenue to help pay for the maintenance of old buildings, or it's going to be a soft value that the community really loves this. This is a trail or a site, or it's an activity, and the community is willing to support that because it brings a utility, it brings value. Hopefully it'll support both. So those are the 3 criteria for any use that Doug and his team and the land economist who was a part of the team looked at when they looked at feasible, reasonable uses of the buildings. And where do I point this? Towards what? Okay, thank you. So with that kind of intro of what we're doing tonight and what and where we are in this process, I'd like to turn this over to the analysis of building conditions, feasible uses, site designs, and cost to Doug Seller Drury Architecture. It's yours.
I'm going to do my best to walk you through these slides, and hopefully you can hear me. And I think we've set it up, so I'm just going to jump right into it. We had a public forum, you might recall, this summer where we asked questions. Tonight, really, it's to show you the direction that it's going, some of our observations, and to bring you into where we are today, and then ask for your feedback. So, Jim, if you'd get me on the first slide, and then the whole time. Use both hands here. Hello. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the site, then the buildings, then governance, and a few other odds and ends. And so the site, as Dennis said, it's primarily agricultural. It's an important part of how the buildings are used. And in fact, before I jump into this, let me go back. Can I go back, Jim? The bottom button. I want to point something out. So this began as a master plan for the historic buildings. We replied to a master plan. We're architects. We reuse buildings, and we thought, excellent, let's respond to this. And the more we talked to the ad hoc committee, who's been very engaged and I think on the ball with this process, we pointed out that how can we talk about buildings if we don't understand the land? And then, so I hired a landscape architect, Simone and Collins, who does master plans all the time. And they said, well, how can we talk about buildings and sites without understanding the uses? And we can't understand uses without understanding the region, the economy, the demographics, the people that come here and what they might want and what the market can bear. And that's where forward planning came in. So we essentially, what differentiates what we're doing this spring and summer is our effort is comprehensive. We have landscape designers looking at the site and telling me as an architect the types of things the site needs to be successful and how buildings can support that. A land use economist who talks about uses and demographics and who wants to come here and what kind of things do they want to come to. A structural engineer who's been doing this for decades, who understands barns, lives in a 16-something house himself, understands buildings, and finally a preservation architect who's nationally recognized to talk about how does National Register nomination, how do historic districts, factor into this. And probably when I began, I thought I would be diving into the dates and the floorboards and the nails and the tree rings and really understanding the dates of all these buildings. And frankly, it hasn't been easy. So I'm trying to advance this here. You say I point over here, do I make this advance? Maybe I'll just do next with you, Jim, if you don't mind just staying there each time. So we're just doing next. So that brings me to the site. So we know the land, it's 226 acres. You have an easement, which is the agricultural portion. In the middle of it is what we call the non-agricultural easement area, which is kind of, its name is a negative, which is interesting. I'm trying to make a positive out of that area. And that there's 4 zones to the property in my mind. There's the farming, the Patterson farmstead, the Satterthwaite farmstead, and then D, which is sort of my little piece I brought out of this observation process, is that there's an area along Mirror Lake Road is a potential zone D. And I'll talk about why I feel that in a moment. So next slide, please, Jim. So here's the property, the total parcel, Mirror Lake Road, whatever that is, Langhorne Yardley, Edgewood Village, and your property connects over here to Yardley Langhorne Road, and that could be in a significant part of going forward. Next. So our landscape architects, we walked the site, studied the site, looked at topography, natural features, kind of road circulation. And this is just an example of the analysis. I'm going to first present sort of analysis and what was seen, and then I'm going to talk about where I think we should be going. So this is just an example of the analysis phase. Satterthwaite, Patterson, non-easement area. Next. Buildings. There's 15 buildings. There's about 44,000 square feet. I'm still checking the math because there's a lot of buildings. First impressions, I think everyone's first impression is they're in rough shape. Structurally, they're almost all sound. The Satterthwaite corn crib could actually be kept standing if you want to. It might not be worth it. The engineer called it derelict. The rest are all fair to good. Some are fair to poor. The buildings basically were constructed as they needed. The interesting thing about these farms, as you all know, how fantastically representative they are of a Pennsylvania farmstead, particularly Quaker ones. We've got two examples. They go back to the 1600s. Their uses. But there was a structural engineer that pointed this out. Essentially, these buildings have big residences, which are special, where people lived their lives and they were sort of unique. Then you've got the large barns, which are big structurally. They're unique structurally because of their size, their volume, the way they're built. And then you got a bunch of specialized buildings that kind of popped up around it as needs came along. Corn cribs, well houses, equipment lofts, garages, what have you. So they're constructed as they need. They're a little bit haphazard, and that's part of where the charm comes from. It's why it's such a picturesque place. Next. So we began by just jumping into the bricks and mortar. So we digitally had both parcels scanned. This is, I think it's a beautiful image. This is a computer scan of the Patterson farmstead. It looks like a watercolor, but it goes from the well house, Janie Brown, over to the main barn. Next. Then from those, we have 3D models. We then put wireframes around them, developed accurate elevations, and next, accurate floor plans of all 15 buildings. When you read some of the historic stuff, people say, it's actually not 15 buildings, it's 14 buildings and 2 structures, but who's counting? A structure apparently is a small building. Next. You learn a lot in these projects. Charlie Timby sort of went through the buildings. He has a narrative about their conditions, what the issues are, how they're framed, but essentially they're in okay shape. Next. Here's an assessment of sort of a diagram of the conditions. This is Patterson, blue, good, fair, poor. Patterson has no buildings in poor condition. The variant on that is several of them have groundhog holes, as you know, which are areas of concern, but they can be repaired. And the end bay of the Patterson barn has had water damage. This, Charlie would probably say, is in poor condition, but overall the building's in fair condition. Next. Satterthwaite farmstead has the small barn and the big barn. The big barn, the township spent money on. It did a good job on it. It's quite nice, but the foundation wall in the back needs to be underpinned. It's failing. That's why it's deemed as poor condition, and the corn crib's derelict. Although Charlie said we could plumb it square and keep it if it makes sense. Next. So the building chronology, based on just looking at it and reading some of the stuff, which there's a kind of a strong preservation community in the town, in the community within your community, and they've shared information. There's contrasting views. If this is the Patterson farmstead, my understanding is that the Janie House, 1837, it was built over a structure that was there, and that the caretaker's cottage might be quite old. I don't just, this report, the other interesting thing about this master plan study is I am not able to answer every question in detail. It has to be at this level, sort of putting information out there so that when people come in to deal with a well house or the corn crib or another building, they get in deeply, and if an HS source structure report is appropriate, then you get into the dating of it. This is just sort of a sense of how these grew. These were the earlier buildings. The barn grew in 2 or 3 campaigns. The equipment garage, as I call it, is a building that I kind of have a special place in my heart for, is one of the earlier ones. This could be the earliest. It's hard for me to say. And then the most recent one is the pack house. Next. So they range from 1839 to 1950, perhaps way earlier. Satterthwaite has similar sort of contradictory dating, but as you can see, the Satterthwaite barn seems to be, from what I understand, they built that before the house. So if that's 1820 and the original Satterthwaite portion is 1840 with an addition in the 60s, I think, Helen, I'm not sure. And then additions in the 30s. And then again, the corn crib is a mid-century campaign, and then the latest one. But I don't want to get lost in the details. The point is they grew incrementally. Next. So preservation's a giant topic and for this site, and a very important one. So when the land was acquired and the highway was built, there was a study done about this site, and both parcels, the full parcel, all the buildings and land are deemed National Register eligible. That condition exists, although it needs to be updated. It's not a fight you'll have to wage. You will win that battle, I believe, if you just pursue the steps of updating the knowledge that they have. And the reason why the State Preservation Office recognizes these properties is that they're associated with events that have made a significant contribution to broad patterns of our history, and that the site and buildings embodies distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction. There's like a 3 or 4 tests. Your site meets 2 of them. You are eligible. You still have to go through steps to become National Register listed, and that is something that can help you with grants, with recognition, with mainly, those are the 2 biggest reasons. It doesn't protect things from being demolished, as most of you know, but it's an important step to consider, and we're recommending you pursue. And your period of significance is a long one, 1837 to 1950. Next, Jim. So we studied how to sort of, what does this mean? We think it may or may not be important to be National Register listed. After studying it, we think the answer is yes. Can't hurt. It could be a good thing. There's no reason not to do it, and you're eligible. So do it. Question is, how do you do it, and in what way? And one thought is Edgewood Village has a district. I'll show you a map in a second. It's nationally recognized and locally recognized. It has a HARB, and it has an historic commission, and it has a methodology and an accepted design guidelines for how to protect historic resources, and it can be an important tool. Another tool is covenants. So if the site's developed or if it's expanded as a village, covenants can be tied to deeds or leases, or it could just be in the form of guidelines. But they're an important part of preserving historic character. And like I said, National Historic Register inclusion will help with grants and funding. Next, please, Jim. So this is a drawing that shows the Edgewood Village local district, the national district, the Patterson site, and just for the sake of it, the non-agricultural, the non-easement area, and that's where the 2 farmsteads are. So one scenario is the whole district is expanded. It wouldn't impact neighbors because it's really just this parcel only, but it allows for funding for the municipality for certified local government status. It helps with grants, et cetera. Next. So I'm going to shift to a new topic, which is land use economics. So we forward planning did a pretty extensive search up front just sort of uncovering facts like I'm doing by measuring buildings and creating drawings and studying bricks and mortar. He's looking at the region, at demographics, at uses. We did interviews of a dozen stakeholder groups and people, and he's looking quantitatively at population, income trends, complementary competing uses. He looked at qualitative factors such as the types of uses that fit this site in this region. And then he did studies, which we showed at the last presentation earlier this summer, how and some of the ad hoc meetings, if maybe we didn't cover it so much then, but they've been open to the public, is drive times, near drive times, long drive times, 15 minutes, half an hour on both sides of the Delaware. Next, please. And what his basic conclusions were that millions of dollars are spent in this area. This is like a very enviable tourism region. And tourism is local people doing local things as well as regional people from surrounding counties or the city, and then people coming in from outbound. So it's very hot, for lack of a better word, tourist area. And that the people that come to this area like going to places. They like galleries, they like historic sites, they like restaurants, they like festivals, which doesn't mean Woodstock Festival. It means little things that people like to go to, like a food thing, a craft thing. Could be anything, frankly. People are looking for things to do. And this is a region that people come to, and that's the disposable income of or it's not the household income, which is all of these metrics are above national averages. So it's enviable for places that people go to. And he identified that different ages are interested in different things. Boomers like food and activities. Gen Xers are looking for things to do with their family. Millennials are kind of open to different things, but they're budget conscious. And that the Gen Zs are kind of like the millennials, kind of, hey, what should we do today? There's this cool thing going on up at Lower Makefield. Let's go check it out. It's at a farm or something. So the potential's there for many things to be successful. Next, please. So we looked at, or Todd looked at, different models of like prototypes, examples of things that are potentially similar that we can learn from. I haven't been to all of these, I've been to some of them, but essentially we looked at two broad, maybe several broad themes. Businesses, like bed and breakfasts or offices or things like that. But two kind of themes came about. One, because it's a farm, places, destinations, if you will, that are on a farm or associated with a farm, or are celebrating farming or agriculture in some way. And the other aspect, because of the demographics, because of where you are, is the arts aspect of crafts, arts, tradesmen type businesses that people go to, whether it's, not a great example, but, a mini peddler's village type thing, if you will, or a place that's like, which one of our examples I'll tell you about in a sec, Peters Valley up in the Delaware Water Gap. But these two examples are just two of many. I think Langhorne I haven't been to, but some people we interviewed told us it's a good model. But I won't spend too much time on these because it's not my research. Next, please, Jim. The Sanborn's Mill Farm is one that one of the ad hoc members visited. It's in New Hampshire. It's a farm operating as a farm. There's animals, there's farming. There's also arts in the buildings. People come to it. People come there to be part of nature, to experience agriculture, to take a class, to buy art, not necessarily to do all of the above. What makes a place like this successful, I think, and can make you successful, is people go there because they're a birder, or because they want to fish, because you made a fishing spot in the pond, or they care about agriculture or learning about it, or they want to take an art class. And then when they're there, they expand their interest and they do something else. So you want multiple people with their own individual focuses coming to the same place, and that's how you build success. Sanborn does that. Peters Valley is this fantastic place in Delaware Water Gap that it's a village of buildings that they've saved, and they have an iron shop, they have a ceramic shop. You know, they sort of like, it could be a model for you all, like several we looked at in Florida and elsewhere, where each building has maybe a craftsman in it or a tradesperson, a little business that's operating on their own that sort of enhances a theme of ag heritage, arts, and agriculture. Next. So that was sort of how we got to where we are. I'm going to talk now a little bit about where I think we should be going. And the first one begins with governance. We studied this quite a bit. It kind of comes down to 2 or 3 options. We're partially here tonight, and because of governance, the township's a landlord. They haven't been, even though many of you might think they are, I think they've done a pretty good job of keeping roofs on them. You know, they've done, they've kept heaters in it. They got some tenants. Basically, the buildings are still standing, I think, in large part because of them somewhat doing the right thing. But I think because they're a township, it's difficult for them to make decisions. It's hard to be nimble. It's hard to like, let's go fix that, because you have to like do too much to do it and things just decline. So township continuous landlord, it's the least successful because it's difficult for them to be nimble, difficult for them to act like a landlord. You really want to act like a landlord to operate this thing properly. A curatorship is something that one of the ad hoc members discovered. It's where a building is owned by an entity, a state, public, or could be a nonprofit that does a long-term lease in return for sweat equity or money. And we have a couple examples of those, where somebody could do a 25-year lease for a building for not much money, and then they have to renovate it, and they live in it, and it's what the National Park Service does with many of their buildings. It's an interesting model. Where we're leaning towards is a 501c3, which is a new entity that exists, that manages the property, township owns it. They raise money, they get grants, they negotiate the leases, they decide through a process kind of like what's been going through with the ad hoc hiring us, or how to decide this building, this tenant, this budget, this rent, and it's sort of, you're acting as a landlord. And then I think a point that I want to point out that item 4 is that friends groups from other master plans we worked on are very important for success. Like the fact that there's many people here, the fact that there are friends groups, that there's volunteers. At the last public meeting, several people came to me who are birders. They wanted to make birding more prominent. Those are the people you embrace to sort of bring another layer of interest, and they help give your project wings. Next. I'm sorry. So on the governance end, there's 2 examples. This is a curatorship in Massachusetts. It's a gatehouse in a park that has a theater program in it for children. Dudley Farm in Connecticut is a 501c3 operated, very similar to you. It's a farm that has things going on in it, CSA, community co-op garden, arts. It's kind of a similar mix to what we're talking about here. Next, please. So governance is important. I can't stress it enough. It's really your next step is to set your governance, decide how you're going to do it, and then start operating. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the site. So I think we should start thinking of, everyone says it's agriculture, it's all agriculture. And it is. You're mainly farming the place there. You've got 38 acres or 43, I forget what it is, that's set aside. And the farmer's farming a good bit of that. And it probably should continue to farm a good bit of it. But that part is the area that can be a public asset and should be looked at as a place that maybe the public gets into more than they have, certainly in a in a way that's sanctioned and safe and separate, so you don't have the type of collisions that Dennis talked about with farm equipment. So to do that, we want to separate vehicular traffic. We want to, as an early step, get the farm traffic separate from people coming in and out and from people walking. I want to provide access to the natural areas, which includes the ponds. And another aspect that we're pursuing is that this master plan not be a useless document that doesn't do anything for you. Like we began with, well, let's put trails along the woods over to Yardley Langhorne Road and go around, and let's move the compost pile. We would love to do those things, and you might do them over time. But this plan reflects what can be done with the ordinances that you have now in your easements. And I'm hoping that you'll like the direction it's going, but also it's something you can build on. And that we have sort of come down to, helping each farmstead have its own identity, where Patterson has some direction already. It's got 2 leases for 2 properties that are well-maintained or reasonably well-maintained. They're heated, they're occupied, they're not falling down. They're on the good chart if you look at the condition rating. And we think that should be built on. And then at the Satterthwaite side, build on the ag heritage as a tourism and destination, and to help with this whole education about how food is produced and celebrate what Dennis was talking about. Next. So the site begins with, here's your parcels. We're suggesting a farmer's road be extended to Langhorne Yardley Road with a gate and through the woods. It's an early action. It be separated to go around, sort of like it does now, but give the farmstead a little more room so it can be its own entity. And essentially, the farmer comes in here now. We're suggesting they come in like that. Compost, it's difficult to move it. I'm suggesting that it be shortened, not be moved, that it just be kept where it is and move it someday. Part of its moving is to do it in a way that the compost can be used on the land, but that has to do with how you're processing it and where it's going and different things. And it's just, why deal with it now? There's reasons why it makes sense there. And then parcel, this is the Satterthwaite house. At one point, you all probably remember the Orange Animal Vet proposal to buy the whole 5-acre parcel. Sounded like a great idea to some, and it was like, it changes the character dramatically. I don't think it's a good idea personally, but what I learned from that is that there is 4 parts to this: agriculture, Patterson, Satterthwaite, and oh, by the way, this parcel is on Mirror Lake Road. This parcel, the house specifically, if it was separated from the rest, then, and this is why don't we zoom in? That's a good slide, Jim. So I'm going to take this slide. We'll zoom into the next one, if you would, Jim, the next slide. This is Satterthwaite Patterson. You can see the easements. This could be separated, sold, long-term lease, or kept, because we have options on these things, and still allow an ag heritage use and an arts use with other sort of nuances to it. So we're going to look at these in a sec, but essentially the idea here is to create a paved area that gets the cars behind the farms, the buildings, so that this becomes a public area, a natural area, pedestrian, trails to the pond, that you can come up to Patterson so you can walk between the two, keep farming the land, and within your easement, within the non-easement area, keep trails. Potentially they could be expanded, but for year 1, 2, 3, you could have quite nice trails where each area is treated as a trailhead. So if you want to come in and just walk, you come in, park, walk, do a loop, go home, or you come in, you conduct business with somebody in here, or go to an event, or go to this house, or on this side, you come in, park, go to your buildings, do your activity, and leave. Next. So the way this sort of happens at Patterson is we're suggesting not bringing, because right now, basically, you've got the Janie Brown and the caretaker cottage. It's not high density use. If some of these other buildings start getting uses in them, there's more people, more traffic, this becomes less pleasant. The idea is to bring people in, let them park, do a loop and leave. But if you need to come in, if it's for access for loading, because you're handicapped or you're going to an event, you can have limited. So people that are in the know, they do this. Other people can do this. It's not like highly policed, potentially drop-offs in here. But the idea is to keep this as a green, and we'll talk about these buildings in a sec. One feature of this is the packing house is potentially could be used by the farmer, even though it's kind of within this enclave of all these buildings. It's the one that lends itself to it the easiest. I think it should be considered. And you could say that's true of the Patterson barn, but I think it's doesn't lend itself to it quite as much structurally, size-wise, and I think it has a bigger impact on this if it is used by the farmer. But I think this one is one that should be considered. Next, at Satterthwaite, similar idea. You come into the buildings from the rear, the main barn, little barn, well garage. Keep this building for the farmer or township use. These roads are farmer township roads. And the idea that if the compost pile moves back, this area perhaps becomes a public space for events, for activities, for camps. Maybe the Parks and Rec program uses this building tied to the trail system. But if you're using the trailhead, you park, use the trail. If this is a business or a residence or a mixed use, one of the things I like for this is the idea that there's a community use on the first floor, ag heritage type education with a residence upstairs, or it could be a bed and breakfast or any number of things. Next. So on the buildings, this is a view of Patterson, shows the parking idea. Once you get into here, it's more impervious, ecologically friendly paving. Farm road goes around. This could be staged if there's no need for parking behind the barn because this is a storage use upstairs, then you don't need that parking. We're looking at the buildings at different levels in the barns. We'll talk about those in a sec. And I'm going to just jump into a few buildings by an example, and I'll be wrapping up fairly soon. But I'm going to look at this barn first. But we've done a study for all 15 buildings. There's sort of a summary on the wall there. And I encourage you to look at them. But essentially, there's three options for each building, with the exception of Satterthwaite House, which we really have 6 options for. Next. It's partially because they're important to this community, but they're also have more options, and they're also more difficult to come up with a solution on. So this is Patterson's main barn. It's a large barn. It's a standard Pennsylvania barn, I think they call them. Has a shed addition on the side. Next, please, Jim. The upstairs, this is the end bay where the structure is not as sound, but essentially it's a classic timber bent frame barn with purlins and siding. It's quite a beautiful space. Downstairs, it's a sea of columns, groundhog holes, and the structural engineer said this is quite robust structure that if you regularize these columns, as he calls it, this can become quite usable space. And in the process, you drop the level a little bit, and it's a very good space for businesses, frankly. Next. So the study on the Patterson barn, essentially, and sorry, these colors are meant to correspond with uses which aren't coordinated yet. So we're not 100% there with our documents. We're kind of sharing the process with you as this goes along. But the lower level, both cases, we're visualizing it as classroom. I'm saying it arts related. That could be a business that's compatible, like a leather maker, a carpenter, could be an artist, could be a printmaker, anything that sort of adds to that theme of this place as a destination. Next. And then the plan of how that works, you got the stone walls. This is an option showing that if there was an event space upstairs that linked to that village green, you could have a lobby, stairs, elevator up. But the lower level, it's studio business space, studio classroom space, you know, with a porch outside, and it could be just a delightful place to come to work in every day. Next. And it's pretty big. It's like 33,000 and some square feet. These aren't small buildings. That area is a little larger than the pack house in area. The upper barn has 3 options. Essentially, the first one's somewhat intriguing. It's kind of the home run plan, as I call it. It's, you know, Todd identified it's something like a craft distiller. Could be like very interested in this. It's about the right size. It's the right identity. But if you imagine, you know, transforming the Patterson farm to the extreme model, a B&B in the Janey house, a destination event thing like a distillery in the upstairs with craftsman artists below in the equipment barn, public bathroom in one of the smaller barns for the trail users, and a farmer actually working and doing his job around the edges. It's fantastic. It's like, who wouldn't want to go there? Now, that's just option, you know, that's one option. Another one is, well, that's, and in that scenario, you lease it to them for very little and they invest that money. They fit it out. It's millions of dollars for them. But for you, you're providing them a shell. Other options are stabilize it, waterproof it, get power, get ventilation, use it for storage for Lower Merion Township, or for summer camp events, but not heated, not air conditioned, no bathrooms, just raw space. That could be storage for a farmer, but it's hard to get into. It interferes with other site aspects. Next. And then this plan shows if it was an event space, large lectures, possibly weddings. No one's wanted weddings here. Everyone we've interviewed says, some say it should be weddings, others say we don't want all the commotion, but it would be a nice event space for lectures, art shows, galleries, but essentially you'd come in the bank from the back, bathrooms, elevators, stairs, big room, loft. You saw the interior. I think the trick to this is to keep the character of that interior, and insulating those walls and how that's done adds to the cost of really making the upper barn 12 months usable. It's an expensive ticket. Next. So you can see on the wall, all 9 buildings at Patterson are shown, but I'm only talking about the bigger buildings tonight because of time. At the Satterswaite Farmstead, same idea, traffic, the buildings. This is sort of the agricultural village. This could be part of it, but it doesn't have to be. The farmers here farming, literally. This is that space I was talking about. It could be quite interesting for the lower level barn to come out into. My A scheme here is that's a pop-up space, I call it, where you open the doors, an event is leased for like food festival, you know, I don't know what, car, antique show, bottle show, you tell me, but there's a space supported by a building in a landscape that you can park at and go do something else while you're there. The corn crib is here currently for about the same cost as repairing it and not having a use in it because it just raw standing it up, is you could build a pavilion that supports this space and then helps block the compost. I'm not against compost staying there, frankly. It's part of life. I walk in the Norristown Farm Park several times a week, walk by a compost pile, never had a problem. It's interesting to see organics, especially if it was used on the farm. And the way they process it here is not particularly stinky. Next. You have to worry about that sometimes. So this is the Satterswaite house. You all know it, original 1840s. added on to 1860, 70, 1930s addition in the back, although it might be this portion is very, very old, just don't know. I mean, I don't know. Until a real HSR is performed by people that have a need to perform it and really get into it, I'm not sure anybody's going to know. Next. Couple views inside. It's quite intact. It's got some animals are broken in. It's kind of dirty. It's got some asbestos in the basement, but it's basically sound. I think people's first reaction is structural engineers, this place is in great shape. That said, there's some damage on the third floor. There's some other conditions, nothing that can't be solved. Next. Upstairs view and the delightful old kitchen, which I think is a charming little room. Next. So the Satterthwaite house, we studied 6 ways. Is it 6 ways from Friday? Is that the expression, Dennis? But the first 3 are sell it or long-term lease it. This is the vet business. It's on the table because it was on the table. No one really likes it, in my opinion. The bed and breakfast is intriguing. Does it really work as a bed and breakfast? Size-wise, it's not bad. Room count-wise, Todd, the economist, says no, no, no. He says it's too much money. It's too close to the road. I think an RFP from the governing 501c3 could explore that possibly. He thinks it would have to be sold for that to happen. This option is just sell it fee simple to a resident, for a house, for a business. And the reason why you consider selling anything, it's not because you just want to sell stuff, because you can't really sell other buildings all over the place because it's a patch quilt that breaks things up. If this property is a district that's protected historically and it has covenants on its deeds of all the parcels, as much as I recognize that this is the landmark building of the whole property, it could be sold. If it was protected, it wouldn't be, in my opinion, the end of the world for this property. That said, keeping it is cool too. So next slide, please. There's several options here. We're sort of ranging in how much you use it. The first one is use the first floor only, keep the second floor and third mothballed. It could be an agricultural heritage type 501c3 that educates people, has classrooms, lectures, just uses it as a headquarters kind of. That's the least expensive approach. If it's going to be kept, it's not a bad one. It puts people in it, puts heat in it, protects the building, and it provides a public use. The middle ground is fix it up as an office and lease it as an office. That could be done, puts the township or the 501c3 in the landlord business. They might not want to be in there for that. It's not that supportive of the overall mission, but it's not bad. And option 6, the most expensive, is a hybrid of a nonprofit on the first floor with the residents upstairs. It would generate the most income, but it also is the most expensive. And those are the trade-offs you have to make going forward. Next. Plan showing that division of 501c3 with residents. Next. Second floor, 3 bedrooms, offices in the back for downstairs. Next. The Satterthwaite barn. This barn, as you all probably know, the township, again, I think it was a good move, saved it from falling down by doing heavy timber work in here, did a pretty darn good job. I'll show you a picture of the basement where it's just a sea of columns, which structurally does the job, but it doesn't allow it to be used particularly. But it is a fantastic space. It's a space to be nice to have people experience. And we're trying to keep this forecourt as a public space with cars behind. And we'll show you the inside in a sec. Next, please, Jim. So upstairs, unlike Patterson, this one is intact. It's got new boards, most likely. You can see the daylight through there. These are new boards. It's a beautiful space. Barns with light coming through the boards are things of beauty. I think this should be experienced as it is, which means you don't insulate it. You don't use it 12 months a year. How do you use it? So it could be a rustic event space. It could be an exhibit for, for things, agricultural type stuff. It could possibly be, we explored, could it be used by the farmer? Again, it's a hard sell. Doors are hard to get into, floors aren't that strong. But it interrupts the rest of the use of the site. So this should be a people space in my view. And the downstairs, again, it's kind of a mess of columns and all. You regularize it. And the one portion is Lower Merion Township storage. And the other part I'll talk about in a sec. Next. Oh, what did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm from that end of Montgomery County. So next, please. It's definitely not Lower Merion. So the lower level, really what floats my boat is option C, I think, option 3, which is a pop-up space. And why don't you go to the next slide, please, Jim? So the pop-up space idea is if this is the overall barn, this is the structural wall that needs repair. This portion, which was added in the 1870s, I think, could be kept for Lower Merion Township storage to support this outdoor space or just activities in general. It could be on the farmer's side, so the farmer actually could use it if it made sense. But here, this can serve that public space. And at this end, where the trailhead's coming from parking, we're seeing as bathrooms for the trailhead, so that, you have to figure out when they're open, what the hours are, what's the access. But generally, parks people understand how to use public restrooms in parks, and it's a nice amenity. Next, please. Upstairs has the same sort of 3 levels of uses where, the middle one is this rustic event space. And option 3, it's more money where you create, go to the next slide, please, Jim. You create at this end, even though it might be kept as seasonal, 7 months a year or so, have bathrooms in it, have a catering area in it. You need extra stairs so people can exit for emergencies, perhaps a deck that overlooks that event area. But this could be a fantastic space. Next. So costs really, I don't have costs. Costs are based on what the uses are. If there's 3 times 15, that's a lot of uses. There's a lot of potential costs. But I think what we've learned is that there's a need for near-term costs. There's a need to paint buildings, do base plan trails, get the farmers road separated from circulation. And so we've looked at it into near-term costs, stage 1 costs, which are immediate things, and then the fit-out costs for each building won't likely be public money. They'll likely be negotiated with individual tenants, and maybe for that tenant, for that building on this site with its district, with its governance, with its covenants, can get grants from PHMC, DCNR, you name it, to fit them out with a mix of public grant and private dollars. And the timing of the fit out cost is based on opportunities as they arise. You have to act like a landlord. A landlord has a tenant opportunity, or they want to fill this thing and they put RFPs for it, but it's not, they're all going to get filled in year 1, and it shouldn't be, they're all going to sit empty you should be actively pursuing things and act on them as opportunities come along. Next. So I have, if you ever go to a nice record store or bookshop, there's what they call employees picks. So I kind of have a consultant's picks, I'm calling it, of how I would use these buildings if I were king for a day. And you can kind of see it here, but essentially it's, the Janey House, you have a tenant in there, they're using it, they're paying money. The least amount of cost for the township is to keep them in there. It's the same with the caretakers. It could be a residence, but it's a tiny residence, and you've got to deal, maybe you negotiate them, some storage. The tenant garage, I think you should make public bathrooms for some of these buildings can have studios in them that don't have bathrooms to save money, and you can use a bathroom. And I think this should be considered the packing house as a farmer use. And I think this barn could be a mixed use of studios downstairs with storage or assembly upstairs. The equipment house, again, could be a little lecture space, a classroom space. I think this is the sleeper building that could be fantastic. It could start as summertime only and you develop it over time. Next. Satter's Waste is the same thing, really. Mixed use, bathrooms. I'm suggesting a pavilion, farmer, agricultural heritage display and workshops. You know, if the ag heritage folks for some reason aren't in this building, there's a fantastic space upstairs, make a nice office, could be leased if it's not them up there. And, you know, this really is kind of has been and still is kind of one of the nuts to solve here. And so if it was carved off because of the way the parking's going behind these buildings, which after quite a bit of study, we don't want it to go in front of here because of compost truck traffic. Frankly, it would destroy the quality of that space. It's about a 0.6 of an acre. It's a fairly small site. So it might not be that saleable, but it might be, and you just have to explore it. But my pick is find a use for that is potentially independent from these. But if it were to be part of it, it would work, basically. I think you should consider that as a parcel going forward, a separate parcel. Next. These are just lists. We can go through these two. Next, please. Next. So I think the schedule and the timeline of things being done, it's based on the budget process. I imagine you all are, the reason this schedule is hurried as it is to be able to give the township the ability to know what these first year costs, the stage 1 costs might be so they can act on it. I think the governance structure those discussions should start immediately. And stage 1 work could start happening next year. I don't know why it couldn't be. You need the plan for it, you need to bid it, and you need to line up contractors. Is summer 2024 too early? I don't think so. But it requires continuing the process. Next. I don't really have costs per se, but this is the scope on the buildings. It's paint them. I think painting would go a huge way. Repair windows, doors, fix any boards that are missing. Structural repairs on buildings that are unstable, such as some of the foundations, patch roofs. That's basic. Site, I think bringing electric to Satterthwaite can't hurt. Patterson's not in terrible shape for year 1. Start working on the compost, work on the farmer's road, get through the woods, and then start the design for the things that take longer, like trail networks, some of the other infrastructure costs. Next. So just to summarize, 4 zones: agriculture, public access to the non-easement area, I think is important, arts, an arts theme, and an ag heritage theme. That's what Todd, the economists, and the rest of the consultants think you should hang your hat on. It gives you something to identify uses and focus them, even though they all interrelate. The buildings are sound, but they need some attention now. Governance is key. And I just want to remind people that the first stage requires public money. It's painting, it's repairing, it's the stuff the townships kind of did for a while, but I think they don't know what to do is my impression of it. And this hopefully will give them the guidance to know what to do. And then beyond that, you're sort of managing it going forward. Next. I think that's it. So I'm sure I took way too long. My apologies to all of you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. We really appreciate all that work and information, and the committee certainly has a lot to digest. Are you back on the next slide, Jim? So we want your input. We want public discussion. Just a couple quick summary points to lead into that. In closing, I'd like to say, we know we have an important potential community resource here. This is, it certainly is unique and rich. We need to have it come to life. Farming, yes, it's a priority for the site and for our community. The historical value, what it can contribute to our community, it's a potential. We know it's there, but it's not really doing it today. We don't have access to it today. We don't have the national registration list, national list of historical properties. It's able to, but we're going to need to generate some revenue and community value to do that. The natural aspect, yes, we can see it from the car, but we want people on the site. We want people to enjoy that, to walk in the woods, to be able to walk around the pond and to really enjoy it. There's two major flowing springs on that property. That's where Buck Creek originates, is right there. The scenic vistas into our lower Makefield Gateway, of course, we want to maintain those, but they're at risk. We can't just let these things go fallow as they have. Next, Jim. The vision, we have a vision for it. I want your feedback on the vision, certainly. Jim. We've had professional objective analysis done of all of the buildings, their conditions, their feasible uses, potential designs, the cost to do that. Some of the costs are not that great as we feared. Some of them are huge, and that's part of where the trade-offs are going to lie. We've had professional objective market-based analysis on the best compatible uses. That's what that group forward planning was all about. It was found to be the arts, tradesmen, crafts, education, recreation. Those are all compatible uses. Next. Professional objective site plans. Now, Doug showed some plans that are compatible with farming. They're compatible with the historic nature of the site and what we understand the community's interest and envisioned uses are. Those aren't, that doesn't mean that's the final plan. Those are the beginning plans, but it gives us a structure, something to shoot for. Certainly changing the access that the farmer has to coming out to Yardley Langhorne Road seems very important. That was the original driveway to Patterson Farm. Patterson Farm driveway came out to Yardley Edgewood Road right through that field. That's what they used. It was only in the latter stages that they built a driveway from Mirror Lake Road, because they had people coming in and stealing some vegetables and things. The sixth point is, this is a multi-staged, multi-year process to realize this vision, to take the vision and tether it down to the land and make it real. So we have to start with defined stage one priorities to be achieved in the first 1 to 3 years. And then all the other stages will depend upon the relative successes of those, or what we learn from those, what we learn works or doesn't work. So it's very important that the community provides us input and weighs in and supports what is the proper vision, what are the proper stage one priorities. That's part of what we want to hear. Now Doug is saying, and I agree, clearly the governance of the property has to be in stage one. We can't pretend like things are going to be managed differently and keep the same management structure in place. So the creation of a 501c3, that could be the landlord, that could be the property manager, if you will, to deal with tenants and to deal with projects. That certainly has to be in stage one. What else has to be in stage one? That's part of our questions. Jim? So stage one priorities, just hit a bunch of things here. I don't know how that's structured. Thank you. So we want your feedback, particularly on the vision, particularly on stage one. There's comment cards all around the rooms here. For those who are watching on YouTube or online, you can call in for a public comment that way. The township has on their site under projects, Patterson Farm Master Plan discussion, have a place where comments can be left. That's a particularly productive place to provide comments. And of course, we want to hear your comments here tonight. So if you want to make a public comment tonight beyond the online website and beyond the index cards, please give your name and address quickly for the record. And we want it short, kind of a 3-minute thing. And we were told LMT residents kind of have first priority, if you will, since some of the early stages will be more your dollars than anyone else's. So with that, thank you very much, and I'd like your input. Yes. I'll hang on. You're good. You're good. You're good, Jack. What is?
I don't have to sing, right?
No.
Okay. Jack Fine, 11102 Cornerstone Drive. And I noted the examples that you gave that were really clear. But I thought one of the missing pieces was the use of a resource we have in this area. As builders, as designers, and as users, we have two universities. We have the community college, which, by the way, not only has the campus here, which has historical sites on that campus, but also the other campus in Levittown, I think, area, really has a school that does repairs, teaching kids how to do repairs. So I think involving them also as use of the property, that Holy Family is right down the street, and they could be a resource. I don't know what their curriculum is like, but it's likely that there is some curriculum that deals with dealing with that kind of property, whether it's how to make a profit or how to run them. So that was my suggestion, is that that's a resource, I thought.
Thank you. Thank you. No, the community is rich in resources, and that's part of the benefit, I think, of having a property management kind of structure under a 501c3 that can reach out to those things. So I know the township, as a Pennsylvania government entity, has certain limitations on volunteers and doing things if you're not insured or insured. So there may be those kind of advantages. Other comments, questions from the floor? Steve.
My name is Stephen Hines. I'm 1355 Edgewood Road, and I'm also on the Harb, which has been mentioned earlier in the discussion. I really wanted to go back to the initial premise that is based on that we are suggesting, just from the study, that we'd like to increase the utility of this space and make it more available to our citizens. And that seems to be done in this case through enhancement of the buildings and the site, and in particular, the inclusion of greater vehicular traffic, which has caused some discussion in some of the meetings that we've had on a regular basis in the ad hoc committee. So I would like to mention the fact that there seems to be some lack of consideration of not doing anything. Basically taking what we have there and mothballing or minimally maintaining what we have until, and that might be an initial point we can start at, but not really doing much, and keeping development of access ways, driveways with improvements, blacktop and hard surfaces, etc., and just making it more available by means of foot traffic or other ways to get people around if people are looking for places to hike. But then there's also the aspect of taking the buildings that are there and utilizing the income from the rental of the land, the lease that the farmer pays, and put it into the buildings to just upgrade what we have there a little bit and maintain it for a while we slowly integrate some of these changes so as not to have to go right out and within the next 2 years make a large expenditure of money.
No, thank you. The renting of the farmland generates, I forget, it's 44,000 or 46,000, somewhere in the mid 40,000 range of annual revenue. And the estimated repair for the well house, that little tiny house behind the Jenny house, which is, in my estimation, not a priority, was 80,000. So taking the farm rent with all the, it's insignificant. And no one makes a lot of money renting land to farmers. It just, you do it because they're maintaining the land. I'm on the board of Lower Makefield Farmland Preservation. We rent the 350 acres of fields you see planted in corn along Dolington Road and all these places throughout the township to various farmers. We charge $50 an acre, and we're happy that they're planting corn and keeping the land active in farming, because otherwise it would look like Snipes' parcel. It would just be grown up into weeds and brush. Charland pays $175 an acre at Patterson, more than 3 times what they pay at other places. So renting farmland is not a source of revenue. It just, to be realistic, I mean, there's revenue, but it's relative to 15 buildings. It's really meaningless. It doesn't get you very far. And that is a decision. I mean, a potential decision the Board of Supervisors could make is always the easiest decision, which is do nothing. Let's do nothing. We've done that largely for 25 years. We fix a building if it's really, the rain's coming in, but if that's the outcome, I'm disappointed and our project has failed, quite frankly. Yes. Come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Reitmeyer, 1124 South Houston Road, Lower Makefield. First of all, thank you. I think you and the committee and and Doug, thank you. I think, lots of good thinking. And so, thank you for all the effort. Couple comments about the plan. First, I sort of hate the idea of selling the Satterthwaite house, because I think in that eventuality, the township loses control. And you can tell me how you want about about the deed restrictions and all that. But fundamentally, I think if it becomes a residence, if it becomes a business, it changes the vibe of the whole property. And so I would encourage us to find a use for it and incorporate it into the master plan and not lose control over, the vibe of the entirety of the property, including, by the way, the visuals, right, from Mirror Lake Road and 332, which I think are important. That brings me to comment 2, which is as I looked at your location of parking, I was really trying to visualize it from those 2 road vistas. And I would just encourage us to try to keep the visual purity of the scenic, that the Satterthwaite house is iconic, right? So let's not put a parking lot in the middle of it. I mean, let's be careful where we put the parking is kind of the general comment, right? And as a kind of a phase 0, I'd love to just see more access and walking trails. That'd be a great place to go for a walk, even if it was just a couple of public restrooms and, a pathway around the pond and some parking, right off Mirror Lake Road. I think we could increase public access to the land with some relatively low cost improvements and in keeping with the long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and that has been consistent. Nobody likes the idea of more pavement and more parking. Of course, if we want public access, I don't know how many people are able or willing to ride their bike or walk there either. So there is that yin and yang. There's going to be some trade-offs there, and I appreciate what you're saying. And we've discussed it a lot, that what you raise about the potential sale or long-term lease of the Satterswaite House. And that, yeah, the only reason that's on the table, well, two reasons that's on the table. One, it's probably the most expensive building to repair. And if you can take the most, if you can reduce that expense item and put it onto someone else, a future buyer, that financially, strictly financially, that's a good thing. But number two, it is also located such that it is feasible to slice it off without changing the dynamics of the site. No other building can you say that about. And even that is, it's kind of an area of gray. So it's there as one of 6 options that we need to try to wrestle with. No one's saying it's the best option, and no one's saying it's off the table either. It's a tough one. Satterswaite is a tough one, period. Other questions, comments? Donna? For the record?
For the record, Donna Doan, 2814 Langhorne Yardley Road, Langhorne. My dad grew up in the Satterthwaite house. We were related to Marcus Doan, who came there in 1917. So Dad farmed with Tom and Alice Patterson for almost 50 years. Before he passed away, we started a 501c3 group called Patterson Farm Preservation. And thank you. We were incorporated in 2015 with the desire to get into the Satterthwaite house. And I have my fellow board members, most of them are here tonight. We would love to get in and create Patterson Agriculture and Heritage Center in that house. We want to offer educational programming and foster appreciation for the natural benefits of the farm. It's magnificent. There's nothing more beautiful that you could build on top of that farm, because it is magnificent in what it is. The essence of that farm is just great. When you go there, you feel the peace of that farm. When you look at those magnificent buildings and the old timbers, you feel the spirit of the people who constructed those structures. And that's what we want to magnify and bring out in the community. And we'd love for people to come and see it in a responsible way. So that's what we'd like to do. We have pattersonfarmpreservation.org if you want to check it out. Doug, thank you very much. Committee, thank you very much. And let's go forward. We can't wait to get in there. Just give us the key.
Are there other questions or comments from the, yes, please. For the record.
Jen Nicastro, 1600 Stapler Drive. I'm across from Satterthwaite House, first house in. I love the idea of doing walking trails. I run on Patterson Farm most mornings. My biggest thing is I would like to see Patterson Farm and Satterthwaite connected into the broader network of sidewalks and trails, because I know a lot of us do have young families with kids. We ride our bikes, we run, we walk. I don't want it to be something where when we cross Mirror Lake, we're really scared to get onto the property. So I'd like it to see incorporated into the broader like township plan for parks, recreation, that kind of thing too.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, Doug.
Jim, is Jim here? Could we consider getting the site plan up just to have it in the background? But I just want to say, I didn't point it out, my apologies, but the sidewalk that comes down Mirror Lake from, is it 322, whatever the main road up there, it stops right at your road. And then I'm visualizing there's a crosswalk there so you can get to the trail so that people, it's a fast traveled road, but a crosswalk, then come into the trail system, but also run a sidewalk down that right away on the Mirror Lake side. So you get down to where the sidewalk picks up again on your side of the road, perhaps with another crosswalk. Now that might slow that traffic, but that might be a good thing. There's examples of traffic calming crosswalks and signals, but I think the pedestrian aspect very critical. They brought that up.
Yeah, thank you. Could I ask our Zoom operators if there's comments from callers?
There's no public comment online.
Okay. Okay. Other, oh, please. Yeah, sure. I don't-
I'm Cindy Fatsis. I'm a Yardley Borough resident, 108 North Main Street. It just occurred to me that, and I'm an Artist of AOI member. It occurred to me that the, not Snipes Farm, Shady Brook Farm, which is right the next farm over, has a huge, event space. They're growing. I mean, it's very retail, but they are farming the land. I'm just concerned that we're going to be competing with them, maybe not in a good way. I don't know if you've considered them as a business that's going to be a competition to what we're talking about.
What Shady Brook is pursuing is relatively new industry, and there's classes in it now all over. Agritainment, right? It's agricultural entertainment. The light show is an example of that. You can shoot corn from cannons or pumpkins at cars, and there's all kinds of ways that farmers who are near populated areas are trying to supplement their income. And if you can charge somebody $5 for 1 ear of corn and shoot it out of a cannon, it's pretty profitable deal. We're not. I think the vision here is not so much that as you see at Shady Brook. This is more arts, tradesmen. Like when we looked at some of those outbuildings, like a blacksmith shop and that type of thing. So welcoming and attractive to the public, but not the big crowds, not the kind of the entertainment side of things. Whenever anyone's talked about the big barns and an event space or large event space, we tend to get pretty negative feedback on that. Don't want the kind of the noise and the event kind of traffic where you get 50 cars at once or something. But if there's families coming in and out to a trail, or there's people going to an art class, or they're visiting a tradesman's shop because they want to buy a new iron grate for their fireplace or something, and he's forging those things. That's more what we have in mind, I think, for this space. But you also bring up a good point about the area, because Torbert's farm is for sale or going to be sold and going to be developed just across 332. That's going to probably, that farm, the last crop will be houses that it'll grow. So this kind of space that Patterson Farm represents really is becoming increasingly scarce and precious. And if I had one kind of personal comment to make, it would be, we have to take care of the farmer, because without local farmers who are willing to invest literally millions of dollars to grow these crops and to keep the equipment and to keep it current, all of those fields along Dolington Road and all through Lower Makefield Township and Patterson Farm are going to look like Snipes lot, which is nothing but a place for deer to hide. So, supporting the farmer by going to their farm stands, treating them well as a landlord is critical, because they're the dying breed that we have to. They're going to be extinct here if we don't watch it. I think. Did you have a comment in the back? Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes. And thank you for this feedback. It's really important.
Thank you. This is a really interesting presentation. Diane Klein, 26 Milton Drive. I'm afraid I might know the answer to this already, but I wondered if you've considered accessibility for people with disabilities. I know that it would be difficult to work into the aesthetic, but it seems important to me. And I wonder if it's at all possible.
So on the accessible front, I'm not a trail designer, but trails can be made that way so that, you know, they're accessible. I think the idea of having parking within the site gives you a trailhead. It gives you access to buildings. I think every one of these buildings, except for the houses are one of the toughest things to convert to modern uses. Doors are often narrow. They're often up steps, but the barns, the equipment buildings, the trails, all that can be fully accessible. No reason why they wouldn't be. In fact, they should be for hundreds of reasons. But as much as I love a grass mown trail or a wood chip trail, I'm thinking a variety of trails is important, and certainly accessible ones. My personal kind of the build on Dennis's comment is to get accessible path to the edge of the ponds. Ponds are special places. Maybe that builds interest in the ponds. Several birders came to us at the last public forum, talked about how good this landscape is for that and how there's an interest in the area. So that might allow people to then dredge the pond and bring fishing. So I look forward to the day you can have accessible fishing at one of those ponds on an accessible trail. So yes, is the short answer.
What else? Please, please help yourself to these schematics. And please fill out the index cards. There's a box here with your ideas, thoughts, in any kind of messaging. The committee now armed with all of the information that Doug has provided. We meet publicly every month. If you haven't tuned in, please do. It's the second Thursday, I believe, at 7:30. So we have some work to do now to make some of these trade-offs between options 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and to make some recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on stage 1. What do we feel is most important? What would that cost? And to make the case for making a decision which it brightens the future of this farm, not to make the decision of let's keep doing what we've been doing, because that's we need a progressive decision. And so your support in trying to gain that and win that is much appreciated. And you're doing a lot just by being here tonight. Thank you. Thank you for coming. One more comment.
Okay, we have a few more comments. Just before we start that, I just wanted to mention that the township on our webpage, we do have a plan page for the master plan, provides some background information. It also has some a timeline of some of the things that have occurred that we update periodically, important dates such as tonight's meeting. We have an aerial view video of the Patterson farm that we did a drone video of, so you could picture the buildings and the farm as it is currently. We also have a place for people to participate in addition to filling out forms tonight. If you want to sit on it, think about some of your stuff and make comments tomorrow if you'd like, you can go and participate. You just need to log in or sign up, and then you could go ahead and post your comments about what your thoughts are on the master plan process and some of your ideas. Thank you. Yeah, the question was, are the plans on the website? We will be posting that information as it becomes available for everyone to take a look at. Thank you.
To answer your question, it's not there today. It's still in nearly final form or late draft form. It will be part of the master plan report, certainly. And that's going to be way long. It's going to be longer than you'll probably want. There was a couple hands. Yes. We've talked about that, and there's always trade-offs. It's always better to be in person. I mean, with communications are more effective that way. And so there's a big advantage of coming in person. The advantage of the Zoom that has us concluding that to stay on Zoom is there's 7 members of volunteer members of the committee, plus there's another 6 or 7 invited stakeholders. Not all of them are retired like me, right? They have real work jobs every day in New York or whatever, trying to come home, trying to be, at this building at a certain time after dinner. Zoom is just so much more convenient. You can do it, at home. It saves you the travel time. We do get more participants on Zoom, I think, as well, because it's convenient for the listeners. Not everybody is willing to do what you've done and come and spend a couple hours in this room on a Tuesday night. So it's a trade-off. We've kind of come down on the Zoom. We'll have better quorums and attendance of our own committee members that way is why we've maintained it. And with respect to public comments, we're always looking for more. I mean, I'm always disappointed that we have few. That we know people are watching, but well, yeah, no, I understand. Okay, thank you though. Yes. Yeah, sure. Oh, the people online will not hear you. Sorry. Okay, for the record.
Thank you. I think the one thing that everybody in this room would agree with is we want to see the buildings TLC. So to me, if we see that in stage 1 and that happens, before you start blacktopping and parking spaces increase, everybody will breathe a sigh of relief, because I think to see the decay has been a very hard thing. My name is Laura Tarantino, 185 Durham Road, Newtown. My sister lived in Yardley for 25 years. That's how I have known it and have seen it over my time here. So that makes a big difference. The other thing is, I think there are very creative possibilities to be explored about transportation. I drive, I have a license, but I don't drive, as my sister will attest. There are other things to do. It can be shuttle service. It can be utilizing for larger events, parking lots here, parking lots at the other building that a shuttle can take. There could be with the arts courses, you could give memberships a 5% discount on a course if they share ride. We have to think outside the box. This can't just be, as this area knows, it's cars. It's too much. So I think that's a good thing. And the other thing I'd like to stress about the trails, which I think is the #1 way to communicate to the community, of getting everyone out there to see it, to feel it. It does have to be with respect, and it does have to be knowing that you're going into a bucolic, serene, and untouched area for the most part. In New York, in Long Island City, they restored the wetlands. They have wonderful trails on wooden, it's just gorgeous. But the signs tell you, do not leave this walkway. So you're walking in an area that is pristine, wildlife is continuing all around you, you're not disturbing it, you're respecting it. So you can't start feeding ducks in the pond, you can't start just acting as though it's your backyard. So I think people have to be trained, and once that step happens, you introduce people to, this is your farm. Let's all join in respecting what we have here, because it is a gift. And I'm very excited by all the work that has been done. I think having a farm, knowing that we're losing Torbert nearby, makes me wish in a way that some of that land could help this project. But I know it's big money. So that's the impediment, but thank you very much.
Thank you. And we've talked about the fact that any trails and such public access would have to be managed with signage and, like I say, maybe some boundaries and things, because we can't have people going into farm fields, right? I mean, the farmer can't be worried about, you know, who's laying in the grass today when I'm driving through. So that is an important dimension to this proper public access that I think is very manageable, but it has to be thought through and done wisely. Okay. I'm being told there's a phone call.
Yes, Dennis, I do have one person online for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Hello?
Lori, you're live with the board.
Hi, great, thanks. My name is Lori Gray, and I am a Lower Makefield Township resident. And I just want to say that, embarrassingly enough, this is actually the first meeting that I've attended on this topic. I do attend the Parks and Recs meetings and the Board of Supervisors meetings. I'm very impressed with what I've seen tonight. I'm very excited about this. I hope to get the rest of my neighborhood excited about this. I think more township residents should be excited about this. I just, my one question is, I don't clearly understand what the next steps are and the time frame for that. So if you could go over that for me, I'd greatly appreciate it. If it's online, I just didn't see it.
Well, first of all, thank you for your comments and attention. That's important. The next steps are the committee is going to take this information from Doug and his organization. We're going to distill it down to and focus on what should be included in stage one. We've already had a number of emails amongst us in terms of what must be there, what maybe could be there. We have to do that always with dollar signs in front of them and with understanding of relative trade-offs of stage one. But I think as one of our guests said, what's important in stage one, in my mind, is early wins. We want to see some action, painting all the buildings, beginning, designing a trail. We don't have to move the stars and the moon in the first couple of years. We need to show tangible progress. We need to show that we can attract a tenant or two to one of these buildings, that we can show the community that. And with that, then I think there will, the community support will grow. Hopefully the contributions and funding will grow. We'll be able to win some grants and establish momentum. Right now we have inertia. This committee's been trying to go from inertia to some momentum. What our plan is to make recommendations to the board, our recommendations to the Board of Supervisors at one of their meetings in October. That date isn't set. It'll probably be late October, but that's our goal.
Great, that's very helpful because I know that they're working on the 2024 budget as well. So that's why it was another thing that came to my mind, is a request going to be made to the board, within that budget.
Right. Yeah. And I think, it's going to be some of the smaller potatoes that would be included in probably in this immediate budget. Again, there's a lot of steps to kind of put in place, even though we have these assessments and these plans. For example, if we wanted to do the new roadway, the new agricultural access road to Yardley Langhorne, it's a great idea. We have it on a map. That needs to be engineered. Somebody's got to go out and say, well, you need this much gravel, you need this much weight, and And so there's just engineering studies to be done before you can start to build anything. So there's a lot of work to be done to, get these things going. And how much of that is in 24 budget versus something else, I can't say. But our goal is to get it to the supervisors next month.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good luck. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I have to choose between good management and good luck, I'll take good luck any day. Yes. You want me to bring the microphone to you so that people online can hear?
Hi, Edna Patterson, Delaplane. I live at 1870 Yardley, Newtown Road, Yardley. I appreciate all the work that went into this presentation, and I agree with many of the comments that people have made about preserving the farm, keeping the buildings as they are. But as I listened to and walked and saw some of those, all I could think of is what would Aunt Alice and Uncle Tom think? And I was maybe very sad to think what they would think of this being done to some of those things being done to their beloved farm.
I can't comment on that other than to think that they would be very sad today looking at their farm as it's been. And our goal is to respect it and to have people learn about it, learn to love it, learn to enjoy it. It doesn't look that respected today, but yeah. Okay. Other questions? Donna?
Thanks for letting me make a second comment. What Edna just said brought to my mind a little bit of wisdom from the old farmers, and that when you have a building that needs maintenance, sometimes you can't afford to tackle it all at one time. So it's not out of the question to paint one side of the barn every single year. Just work your way around until the whole thing is done. Sam Stewart and I got an estimate to paint the barn up at Patterson's, and it's $17,000 to paint the whole thing all the way around. But there are common sense strategies that we could incorporate to bring back what Edna remembers and what I remember, and some of us that remember the excellence that Tom held in his farm. Everything he did was to prepare everything for the next 100 years. It wasn't just the next 5 years. So they spent money wisely, and they were frugal, and they made sure that everything stayed in tip-top shape. Now we have a lot of catching up to do, but we can do that, and we can bring it back to what it was, and it'll be magnificent. It really will. Thank you.
I agree with the common sense comment, and and it will, no matter how you approach it, it'll be a lot of money. And the $17,000 estimate is, quite frankly, wasn't possible. I'm familiar with that. It was the Amish painter that Sam's used on his place, I think. And if it's owned by a municipality, it has a lot of constraints, unfortunately, by Pennsylvania law. They have to use union labor. They have to have certain insurance coverage. They have to have certain safety standards. And who you and I hire at our house, the township can't always hire. So it's because it's a public property, it is a little constrained. But I get your point. I do. Do you have a comment?
Later stages. Tracy Mulvaney, I'm a Yardley Borough resident, 20 North Main Street. And I've had experience managing volunteer groups, so it's just something I love. I think the community is so engaged in this project. And so aside from the areas where you really do need the labor to be meet the requirements. I know there's a lot of people that would love to help. So maybe if it's just the trail signs, or just maybe just start gathering names of people who would be willing to volunteer, maybe could take care of some of the costs.
Thank you. And I think the more time we spend with these communications, we're going to find the friends of and the people that are willing to vote time. I'm getting pointed at back here. Yes.
I'd be very popular. They can hear me. John Natick, I live across from the Patterson Farm. Oh, yeah. I live across from the Patterson Farm directly. I've been there since 1980, actually 1975. I knew Tom Patterson. When we bought our house, it was boarded up and hadn't been lived in for 10 years. It was next to the bulldozer, but because someone did some historical research, it was protected. And so we bought it from a developer for $30,000. And it took 15 or 20 years to put it back where it is today. Before we bought it, our railing in the house was stolen. And so I had to make a new one. And I got to talking with Tom Patterson, and he understood that I was making the spindles for the, sorry, I'm not used to this. I'm used to listening a lot. But anyway, and I asked them, oh, that's interesting. You're refinishing your spindles? Yeah, I do one a day. I do one a day. And I learned something in that patience is good. I visited him some years later, some months later, some days later, I don't remember. He was painting the barn. And I said, Tom, you're painting the Satterthwaite barn, and you have one ladder here, one ladder there, and one ladder there underneath each other. He said, yeah, I find that if I paint boards vertically, they all dry together, and you don't find that blotchiness on your white barn from painting all the way across. And then by the time you get across, you come back here and it's already dry, and then you paint again. And over years, you find that your barn doesn't look white, it looks blotchy because your overlapping has dried. And so it's not the best way to paint a barn. I don't know how they're getting $17,000 to paint a barn. I can paint the side of my barn in about a day and a half after masking. It's quick. But I understand that governments aren't good at managing stuff. Don't you know that? And so what I would suggest, this is not going to be popular. I would suggest selling the Satterthwaite house with all its buildings to a person. Maybe you can find somebody that can take it like I took my house and restore it to a gem. That's what I'd like to find for the Satterthwaite house. There's not much, shall we say, political will to restore all that and spend all the money necessary. I would sooner see focusing on you call it the Janney house. I suggest focusing all of our attention on the Janney house, the Tom Patterson house, and the barn. And if you want an agricultural center, that's fine. Put it in the barn. Why not? And I think that's sustainable. I think it's so expensive to maintain all of those buildings, but if we get just the right person for the barn and the Satterthwaite house, they're going to make that a showpiece if you find the right person. I don't care if you sell it for $1. We don't have the will to spend the millions of dollars that they're going to have to spend. I didn't spend near that. I teach school. I spent 20 years restoring my house, one piece at a time. And you were so patient, waiting for what it is today. That's how I feel.
Thank you. Thank you. If no other comments, I suggest sorry. I think we've come close to wrapping. Okay, for the record.
Good evening, folks. Alan Depew, 114 Dolington. Just for full disclosure, I am on the ballot this coming November to be one of the supervisors. I had the privilege to sit down with Dennis and had an informal conversation on where we are, and I applaud the work that this committee has done, that you've done, Doug, that the township is taking this step, and most importantly, applaud everybody here for turning out on a Tuesday night to voice our opinion. This is what it means to be a constituent in a resident in a town, in a concerned town. And quite honestly, I agree with your comments. I'm not sure I agree with selling the house necessarily, but I do ask the question, where'd the money go? And I'm not standing up here to make a political speech. I actually grew up on a farm. My early formative years was on a farm, baling hay, throwing it up, cows, chickens, the whole 9 yards. I can appreciate everything that this represents. My position on it, and therefore would be my position if elected, is we need to take off the handcuffs for what this could become. And we need to donate the property into a not-for-profit, independently operated. We can't have political influence over a not-for-profit that can operate. If that means the township invests a certain amount of money into seed capital to seed this not-for-profit, great. That'd be tremendous. It would also cap our expense. I believe, Doug, last I'd heard, or Dennis, we're around $5 million, and that's just the bare minimum to restore some of the buildings. Am I accurate in that, or? Yeah. Correct. Okay. And I also, and I don't want to put words in Todd's mouth, but Todd, I believe, said we're never going to be able to really recoup that money. So we are doing it so we're all aware. We would be doing it for the purpose of, this is the defining image of our township. And for that reason, it has certain value, but I think we need to be prudent in the fact that, and I'll wrap it up here, that it is difficult for a municipality to manage things. That's why we don't manage the golf course, for example. It is difficult for us to operate sometimes even within a budget. We currently have a budget deficit. We should form a not-for-profit. We should remove the binds that on this property and allow it to be what it could be. One last comment is just macadam. And I was downstream, by the way, of Buck Creek. So I'm looking at all that impervious surface that was discussed, and that's concerning to me. That's more of a personal note, but that would be my only recommendation. And again, thank you, Dennis, Doug, everyone on the committee.
Jeff Herco, 1450 Darlington Road, Yardley. Want to follow Mr. Natick. We got our house pretty much the same way. It was 11th hour, bulldozers coming. The house is 1820. We bought it for 75,000. I bought that in 1995. I'm still working on it. It's a work of love, and I'm the president of Patterson Farm Preservation, the nonprofit group that is trying to get into the Satterthwaite house to turn it into the gem that we all know it can be.
It's almost 8:45. I think we might be at a wrap unless I hear any other. The committee members and Doug are here afterwards, so please come up, grab our shoulders, ask a question, whatever. Pay attention, stay tuned to our public meetings. Stay involved. We really do appreciate your input. Thank you. Thank you for coming.